Good evening. My name is Greg Sesney, and I am the Responder Vertical Marketing Manager here at Dräger, and I would like to welcome you to our second educational webinar on HCNCO, entitled Detecting Hydrogen Cyanide and Carbon Monoxide, a Firefighter's Perspective. Here at Dräger, we focus on products that protect, support, and save lives. We feel passionately about educating our customers on the topics that affect them on their day-to-day lives and other solutions to make their jobs safer and more productive. That is what we at Dräger stand for, technology for life. Before we begin, I would like to review the features of the webinar. You can switch between the presentation screen and the video screen at any time. You can do this by hitting the swap video button, which is located at the top middle of the screen. We also encourage you to ask questions at any time throughout the presentation. You can do this by clicking on the Q&A tab, which is located on the lower left-hand side of the screen. Simply fill in your name, email address, and type in your question, and we will do our best to answer the question at the end of the presentation. Also during the live webinar, we will be selecting at random a participant to receive a donation of $1,000 to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation in their name. Also, we'll be selecting another participant to win a Dräger Exam 5000 gas detector. This is a 5-gas monitor which includes the HCN and CO sensors to help firefighters protect themselves and their team from the dangers of hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. Dräger is pleased to recognize those who make a difference in the lives of others. And to support a worthy cause, currently we are running a campaign called Someone You Can Count On. For the campaign, we are looking for you to nominate a colleague you can count on above all others. Then share the story with us, and if your nomination is chosen, you could win a $50,000 donation to the charity of your choice. Simply visit www.draeger.com for more information. Leading this discussion will be Captain Rick Rockford, a 28-year veteran of the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, and a field incident safety officer in the 2nd Battalion. Along with Captain Rockford is Deputy Chief Billy Goldfeder of the Loveland Sims Fire Department in Ohio, who serves on numerous boards and organizations, including the International Associations of Fire Chiefs, the IAFC, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, and the September 11th Families Association, and is also a co-host to firefighterclosecalls.com. Will be joining Captain Rockford in the discussion. In this webinar, we will be learning about the issues facing firefighters in regards to the toxic gases, hydrogen cyanide, and carbon monoxide, and ways to protect yourself. So, without any more delay, please welcome Captain Rick Rockford and Deputy Chief Billy Goldfelder.
Good evening. I'm Captain Rockford with Jacksonville Fire and Rescue, and this is my honored guest and trusted brother, Chief Billy Goldfeder, talking about the issues of hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. This second webinar is very important in my mind as to the processes of combustion that take place at our everyday fires. In light of this, with this first webinar, is basically as a friendly reminder, we're looking at this as a safe approach to the modern day fires, addressing the atmospheric air monitors. Basically, what are the concerns that we have with the next bread and butter fire that we go to? Going back into the first webinar that we produced last year, there's 3 specific characteristics that come to mind that almost like a refresher that if we would, that we'd like to go ahead and bring to light of this particular program. Starting off with is that where does hydrogen cyanide come from? The hydrogen cyanide, as we all know, is a byproduct of combustion that forms in every fire that you go through. With the plastic and the synthetic generation that we see, there is a majority of our combustible materials are burning hotter, faster flashovers, producing more toxicity than normal combustible fires that have been taking place before in the past. We also look at the medical aspect. Number 2, how does cyanide affect you? These are, between hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, these are both cellular asphyxiants. Hydrogen cyanide shuts down the aerobic pathway, creating lactic acidosis and other toxins that are within the tissues and the organs within the body. Carbon monoxide, the hemoglobin bonds 200 to 300 times that of oxygen. The half-life of this particular contamination is 2 to 5 hours as concentrations decrease within the body. Looking at the acute as well as the chronic exposures, the acute phase creates disorientation, weakness, headache, as well as fainting. Chronic exposures lead to respiratory, cardiac, neurological syndromes, as well as enlargement of the thyroid glands. Next phase, phase number 3 here, is that how are we going to protect yourself? How should we protect ourselves? One of the things that we stress on is that be aware and use your air. Wear your air on all fires that you go to. Also, too, is utilize atmospheric monitoring gas detection equipment. And therefore, also, post-fire decontamination includes also the decontamination of your Nomex hoods. Department-wide educational media is also very important as to the awareness of what hydrogen cyanide and also what carbon monoxide brings. Now, our idea and our concept as far as doing this webinar is working towards the safety of tomorrow's firefighters today. Providing this information, I will tell you that as far as the information that I have captured within the 6 years that I've been doing this, it is an eye-opening experience. Taking this information because of our past practices and experiences and not understanding and realizing the modes of combustion that as it has changed in our time, we have pretty much looked the other way, if you will, to pretty much kind of let me back up on that one because I don't want to get short on that one. In the mindset of today's time, our main objective is working towards the safety of tomorrow's firefighters today. We believe in further education, continuing education of our firefighters, letting them know as far as the products of combustion of today's fires compared to what yesterday's fires were. Under the disclaimer, what we'd like to share with you is that the tests that were conducted according to the NFPA standards 1403, which is the standards of live fire training evolutions, utilizing Florida certified live fire instructors and a certified fire videographer. The atmospheric air monitoring applications that you will be seeing today have been taught through the division of the State Fire Marshal's Office in Florida through the State Fire College minimum standards courses since 2007. The reason for this is because of the fact that we are stressing to have firefighters utilize the atmospheric monitors not only for hazmat events, but also for fires also. So by putting them in their hands, they're able to go and see exactly what these monitors can do in a real-time application. Also, too, is that the atmospheric instrumentation that was utilized for these particular events were gas calibrated the day of the training itself. The basic fire behavior that we're looking at, we're going to call this the Basic Fire Behavior 101. And in theory, what we're looking at is to educate our firefighters, getting back to the basics. What is taking place at fires that we see on a day-to-day basis? And some of the things that we want to look at is that we want to understand as far as the objectives of fire dynamics. How is fire developed? What does it do as the form of that first form of ignition? What takes place? We're concerned that as the fire starts to develop, as it grows, and as it spreads, what is it doing, and how is it affecting our firefighters? We also need to go and remember the fact that fire is an exothermic type of oxidative reaction that proceeds at such a rate that it generates detectable heat as well as light. And in order for that to occur, it must have a combustible fuel present. Also, too, is that an oxidizer, such as oxygen in the air, must be available in sufficient quantities. We also need to look at the energy as some means of an ignition source which is pretty much going to be heat, that must be accepted. These are the three basic concepts of the fire triangle. The last segment that we have is the fuel as well as the oxidizer that must interact in a self-sustaining chain reaction. In order for that chain reaction, that segment to burn, we must have enough fuel to produce the vapors and the flammable fuels necessary to support that particular release. Heat is transferred in three fundamental ways. Conduction, which is energy through the material that's being formed. Convection, which is the circulating matter of movement of the actual vapors and gases and heat within the structure itself. And also radiation, which produces electromagnetic waves as it generates the heat and spontaneously combusts and brings up the flammable ranges of other materials that are within the path of the fire. In looking at the fire development within a compartment, it's broken down into two characteristics. Unconfined, which is fire that is in an unconfined area where you have heat that's produced. It actually dissipates into the atmosphere through radiation as well as convection. The outdoor fire typically has enough oxygen going in and entraining into the fire itself. The only factor is the fuel that is there and the limitation of that particular fuel. And looking at the video itself, you can see as fire is being produced, you can see the flame that is showing, you can see the elevation of heat matter that's being performed, going in and therefore dissipating into the upper atmosphere. As soon as the fuel is consumed in that particular environment, the fire will no longer burn. Fire within a confined area, this is within a structure itself, the walls, the ceiling, the floors, as well as other objects inside the structure itself, absorbs the radiant heat that's actually being produced by the fire. Once the fire itself has absorbed all of those particular areas, it can no longer hold it anymore. It reabsorbs itself back into the fire where it actually increases the temperatures of the fuel as well as the rate of combustion. In looking at this particular video, you'll be able to see that as the fire is generating, you can see the radiant heat that is actually being developed by the structure itself going into the couch that we have, and the heat itself is now absorbing as much of the material, the temperatures as it possibly can. Eventually what happens is that particular phase is that the sparks and the ignition characteristics will slowly but surely ignite the area itself to have full involvement. With smoke, that is the hot smoke that's actually being produced, the air becomes very, very buoyant. As the temperatures in the upper environment are starting to escalate, starting to increase with temperatures, it comes in contact with cooler materials, and therefore the heat that is conducted is going to raise the temperature, the ignition temperature of all of the materials within that structure. The transfer process raises the temperatures of all materials within the structure. Nearby fuel is going to be heated to the point where it begins to pyrolysize. It starts to generate its heat, bringing it up to its own ignition temperature, causing further fire extension. Once that radiant heat brings that material up to its ignition source, it will slowly work its way to the next object, doing the exact same thing, until we have full involvement within the structure. Also, too, another important characteristic is the oxygen concentration within the structure. This is where we have complete versus incomplete ignitions. With this in mind is that sufficient oxygen within a compartment is necessary to support the fire development, which is controlled by the characteristics and the configurations of the fuel, which primarily is said to be called fuel controlled. The fire will burn until the fact is that the oxygen concentration within the environment itself will slowly but surely dissipate and therefore reduce the actual process of burning. At this point in time, the flames itself will start to extinguish themselves down, slow the process of the burn down, and therefore have possible extinguishment or bringing it down into a decay stage. What do you think about that?
Well, that seems very complicated to me. I'm thinking that we've got some young firefighters out there going, what's he talking about? So I tend to simplify things, and I've come to the realization that the best way to understand firefighting is through science and not emotion. A lot of what we do is due to emotion and history and traditions, and we've always done it that way. So what I did is, as you were talking, I thought, well, to the average, or maybe not the average firefighter, but to a brand new firefighter, this is complicated. So number one, the most important thing we can do is get water on the fire. Put water on the fire, and we're going to talk about that later, hopefully, because it's one of my favorite subjects. But the other is, whether it's the hydrogen cyanide or the carbon monoxide, and hydrogen cyanide is the petrochemical-based off-gassing, okay?
Absolutely.
And carbon monoxide is more traditional burning off-gassing of combustibles. They're both bad.
Yes.
So from a firefighter standpoint, while you may want to learn about hydrogen cyanide or you may want to learn about carbon monoxide, forget it. If there's smoke, it's bad. If there's burning, it's bad. Now, obviously I'm kidding when I say forget it. Obviously we need to understand this. But when you're getting to a fire and your priorities are sizing up and determining where the fire is, where's it going, all that, if you see smoke, it's bad. And I don't care if it's nasty black pushing smoke or if it's light smoke. Smoke is the enemy. That's our problem. So Frank Brannigan years ago taught us that the building's the enemy, and now Rick is teaching us the building and the smoke are both the enemy, and fear both of them. But to manage your fear is to understand, and that's what you just did with us. Is you helped us understand the science of that.
Absolutely.
So me being simple, now I understand it.
Very good. And looking at this again, it's very interesting to see the dynamics as far as the progression of fire and how this actually works, and to be able to be inside of a structure and see this firsthand, and to educate yourself and educate others is a mind-opening experience in dealing with this.
You know, when I started in 1973, and it would be very, very typical. First of all, we had a short coat and long rubber pull-up boots, and I'd always come home with a black ring around the center crotch area of my pants, and that's how they were all the time. And little did we know we were getting it in our skin, we were breathing it, and we'd come home covered with this stuff, feeling good about it. Like, wow, we're doing our job.
Absolutely.
You know? Sort of like a football player coming back and you banged up a little bit, but you won the game. Little did we know what that was doing to us. It was just starting to build up and hibernate inside our bodies. And I remember going home, and at the time my girlfriend said, oh, that smells so good. Yeah, it smells great. Well, who knew, right? And then I'd go home or back to quarters, I'd get under the covers, be too tired to take a shower, and there's a soot on me. And what happens when you're getting warm in the bed? Your pores are opening up. So it's sucking in these carcinogens. I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
So now, what I do know is 15 firefighters I worked with during that period are all dead now from cancer. I know that. So we need to understand, and especially educate the young firefighters that are watching this, that what you saw in the old days seemed exciting, and it was. Let's not kid each other. But that smoke is killing us. And now consider that smoke and consider today's smoke so much worse. Because in the 70s, some things were made by the petrochemical industry. Today, everything pretty much is made, unless you live in an Amish farm or something, everything is made by the petrochemical industry.
Yes.
This, the carpeting, this wall, this chair, and when that burns, it's off-gassing the gases you're talking about today.
Absolutely.
So there's nothing cool about breathing that, because it's going to lead to one day you're going to go to the bathroom or take a piss and you're going to be bleeding, or you're going to find a lump. We're seeing an increase of concern for women on the job with breast cancer. So we're not screwing around here. And that's what Rick is kind of banging his drum across the country, is that this is dangerous stuff. Forget Ladder 49, forget backdraft and that image of the soot-covered firefighter. I understand it makes us feel good, it makes us feel cool as firefighters, but this stuff is killing us. And that's what Rick is trying to help us understand. So that's the science versus the emotion. The emotion of wanting to go in there and get it and all those sort of things. But the science is telling us, let's say you're a young firefighter, you just got married, you got some little kids. Well, how much does this matter to you that what you're doing is hurting your kids? You know, I love to use the term, who's in your wallet, okay?
Yes.
Well, that's what we're talking about. You know, if you would be bothered by some psycho messing with your children because it would interfere with children's life, well, to me, it's sort of the same thing. Here we are messing with this stuff, taking a risk at getting ourselves ill or sick or even dying from either heart disease, because you're going to talk about the heart attack issue here, from cancer, things like that. So you whittle away to nothing, you die, and have you hurt your kids as bad as anybody doing some evil stuff to them by not being around your kids?
Absolutely.
So we got to think, sometimes it's selfishness. Like I wear glasses, I put a mask on, it's a pain in the ass and stuff like that. But little do you think about, forget about what's bothering you. What is the impact to the other people that are counting on you to come home? So I just wanted to, the science versus emotion, the science is really important for us to understand.
Right. And along the same line, Chief, this next slide that we want to talk about is the insufficient oxygen. That takes place that as that fire is burning in that closed compartment, the amount of smoke that's actually accumulating inside the structure itself, that when we arrive as the first arriving engine company and smoke is pouring out of every crack and crevice, and understanding how fire burns, and also as far as the amount of heat as smoke, we're looking at pressures, and the pressures that are generated inside, that we see in this particular phase that as firefighters are responding and they force entry into these structures into a ventilated, controlled fire itself, that the flammable ranges are very rich. As soon as we open up that door and we make entry into that structure, we are now bringing that particular flammable range, or rich range, down into a flammable range, and now we're starting to see flashovers on the first arriving engine company responses because of the synthetic materials and the plastics and
burning
everything
faster,
else.
Smoke detectors are alerting us quicker.
Yes.
We're getting there quicker. So we really are, in a lot of cases, walking into a bomb.
Absolutely.
And that's why the size up is so critical, a 360 size up, to read the smoke, understand what the conditions are. And again, and I'm going to say it, if I say it 100 times, it won't be enough, the importance of getting water on the fire no matter where that fire is.
Absolutely.
Water on the fire. The new UL study that's come out has proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt, through science, not emotion,
yes,
the fact is that we've got to get water on that fire to reduce the potential for flashover and to start controlling the off-gassing, which is exactly what you're talking
Correct,
about.
yes. And you know, our gear in today's time is the best that money can buy. You know, the science that has been put behind that is that as this fire is burning, and with the amount of smoke and everything else, is the molecular permeation that is taking place, that's going through our gear and getting into our skin and the soft tissue that we had just addressed just a little while ago, and all of it stems with this type of
big deal
processes.
And the PP manufacturers are well aware of that right now. And to prove this to you, to anybody who's watching the show, the next time you've got to work in fire, when you get back, take your gear off, walk away from your gear, and you'll still smell like smoke, which means it's still getting inside of you, it's still getting to you. We're better protected than we ever have been, but it's still a problem. You mentioned the hoods. Let me talk about hoods for a minute. You talked about the hoods, too. You'll go to a working fire, and your hood will be filthy, and maybe you don't want to wash it, so you hang it up. So you got a 50 or 100 other runs between that and the next working fire. Well, what you do is you put that hood around your neck, and it's filled with all that crap that Rick's been talking about. I'll use the word crap. He's got some other words for this stuff, right? But what it is it's filled with this stuff, and every time you put that hood on,
dermal absorption.
Exactly. You're going to absorb that. You're going to absorb that. You're going to absorb that. This is the thinnest skin here. And Dr. Grace LeMasters, who did a phenomenal study at the University of Cincinnati, has shown that we are more than double the normal population likelihood of getting certain cancers. In some cases, 4 types. And I'm just going to call them off the top of my head. Brain, lung, testicular, bladder, and breast cancer are the biggies. And we can do something about that. Cleaning the gear, getting that stuff off of you after a run. And as you're going to talk about, understanding what you're getting into, monitoring, okay? I mean, the meters, whether it's anybody's, I mean, obviously Dräger's hosting us today, but understand what you get. Use technology as a part of that science to counter the emotion of what we wanted. We want to race in there wearing a bathing suit and a baseball hat. Well, we understand we can't do that. So we've improved our gear. Well, what else is out there? And again, the science through monitoring and things like that has really taught us that, hey, take a minute and understand what you're getting into here.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal.
Absolutely. As we start going through the this program,
this is more science.
We're getting
All
into
right.
we're getting into the basics again. And keep in mind is that we're trying to keep it simple enough so that way everybody can understand. And going back to the beginning is that we look at the 4 phases of fire. We start off with the incipient phase. And obviously, with the incipient phase of the fire has not yet influenced the environment as far as the significant flames, smoke, heat, and everything else. It's very, very small in nature. The temperatures are only slightly above the ambient concentrations of product of combustions inside, which are going to be very low. And also the radiant heat warms adjacent fuel, and it continues the process of the pyrolysis. It's starting to build at this particular phase, and it's starting to expound itself out in areas that have got other forms of merchandise and things of that nature. It's building from one phase and wanting to go to the next one and go to the next one and actually spread the fire chemically, if you will. The hot gases and the fire spreads horizontally across the ceiling itself as the extension of fire starts to elevate in the area, and therefore it conducts heat to other materials, increasing the overall temperatures within the building. And then through this is the transition that you're going to see will actually go through the growth phase, which is going to go ahead and take place rather quickly. As you can see, Chief, the fire, basically as small as it is starting to generate, it's absorbing the heat chemically around there. You can see the radiant heat that as it's working on that couch is starting to elevate the temperatures inside. Things are off-gassing. Spontaneous combustion, when it reaches up to its auto-ignition temperatures by pyrolysis itself, therefore it will start working and capturing that particular couch, going on to other mediums within the structure itself until we start having a fairly rapid fire. So again, as a process of this is concerned, is that, again, this is the phases that take place. As we start looking at the growth phase primarily it influences the environment within the compartment and the configuration and the amount of the ventilation that's going to take place, because we look at the smoke, whether confined or unconfined, is going to hamper as far as what that fire is going to be doing. Also, too, is the ceilings and the walls inside the structure is going to absorb as much of that heat as it possibly can. And therefore, the plume of hot gases are going to be rising from the fire. In dealing with uncontrolled fires, the air that is being drawn into the fire itself is being entrained. And the interesting thing about this, Chief, is that if you have a fire that's up against the wall, it's only receiving 50% of its air into the fire itself, versus in the center of a room having all 4 sides where air is being introduced to help feed that fire. Feed the fire itself.
This is a good time to mention this too. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking, we get water on the fire, you're thinking maybe ventilation. Let's talk about ventilation just for a minute. While ventilation is absolutely essential to what we operate, understand the consequences of your actions. Where am I going to vent this fire? Why am I venting it there? And what's going to happen when I do vent that
Absolutely.
fire? Big deal. We've spread fires because of improper ventilation, and we've also stopped fires due to proper ventilation. So
Absolutely.
Big deal.
Yes, sir. The next phase is the fully developed segment, and looking at this is the energy that is being produced through radiative currents, convective currents itself, is producing its a maximum rate, which is limited only by the availability of fuel as well as oxygen that's inside the structure. In looking at this, is that this is a particular phase is going to be the hottest and most dangerous aspect of any firefighting, especially if anybody that is inside the structure itself. And as you start looking at this particular video, you can actually see the actual buoyancy of the smoke that's being generated by the fire, which is only going up so high because of the elevated temperatures that is above that, that's actually keeping it pressed down. So therefore, the suspended air movement inside that structure is going to take this material and getting into areas where there may be trapped individuals or individuals that are, you know, unbeknownst that there's a fire that is taking place inside the structure, are now being contaminated by the material itself and incapacitated to where the fact that they cannot get out of the structure.
And at this point, as we're pulling up, what we're going to see is good rolling smoke coming out of certain areas of the building.
Absolutely.
It's not quite ready to go, but we're getting close, and that's what you're going to see. And that's when you want to think about, where am I going to vent? And again, to understand where you're going to vent, you got to understand your fire problem. To understand your fire problem, you understand where the fire is. So identifying where our fire is through a good 360, or through reports of the occupants, reports from the dispatcher, and getting a line on that fire is critical.
Absolutely.
It's said in the new books today, and it was said years ago. The most important thing that's ever been done in the history of our business to save lives is getting a line on the fire. And whether you said it in the 50s or you say it in 2011 or 2012, whatever, whenever you're going to watch this video, the fact is more lives are saved by getting water on the fire.
On the fire. Absolutely. Absolutely. The last phase that we look at is the actual decay phase. And with this is that the fuel is consumed, I should say, and the energy is released, diminishing, and the temperature actually decreases inside the structure itself. The products continue to pyrolyze where it's off-gassing to form carbon monoxide and other gaseous materials that are being produced. To me, you know, with the phases that we have, this is one of the most critical phases, because once the fire is out, what do firefighters normally do? They've taken their mask off after they go outside, and they go back in because things are just a little bit of spot fire here and there. They're going to put out with a charged line.
Let me just cut in, because this is a really critical point that you're bringing up. We're looking at a line of duty death that had occurred fairly recently, where the firefighter who was killed, when his company arrived, there was smoke showing, but the initial companies had a knock on the fire. This firefighter went into the building with his partner, and there's a number of other aspects to this death. But what relates to what we're talking about is when they went in, it looked like they had a good knockdown. The failure to fully investigate to find out where it was knocked down, did we have extension, is a factor here. And that fire actually took off, went up the stairs, and ended up killing one of these firefighters. So, as you say, don't let it fool you. Don't let that knockdown period fool you. You better make sure it's knocked down and you've got it under control and it's vented before you tell anybody that you've got it under control.
Right. And again, those accumulated gases that are built up in upper atmospheres can, all it needs is a little bit of air.
That's exactly right.
And for that ignition, and then you have another situation that you just talked about. So again, in looking at this, during this stage, the fire goes from ventilated controlled, that was normally inside the structure, to basically fuel control now, because the building itself has been opened, has been breached, if you will, through fire destruction. And at that point in time, you're bringing air into the structure, off-gassing the chemical toxins that are actually being performed by this. And again, you know, our firefighters are continuously going in without any form of respiratory protection or even any forms of atmospheric monitors along this line. So. Now, I think one of the most important issues that we've talked about, and we've talked some tactics, and we've trying to bring this information up, and we're trying to get you, as far as the firefighters, to start thinking about the next fire that you go to. And again, I cannot tell you enough, as far as many fires that I've fought, no fire is ever the same. Nope. And every fire that I go to in my 20-some-odd years of firefighting is the fact that I'm always learning for every fire that I go to.
I agree.
But one of the things that comes to mind that I feel is very important, not only the hose line that we talked about and putting water on the fire and wearing respiratory protection, but also is that certain tools that are made available to us that we can utilize to help us designate safe zones and determining whether or not the area is safe to work in.
Technology's changed a lot of what we do. I mean, some of it's still basic, and we're still, getting water on the fire. But whether it's thermal imaging cameras, improved radios, improved SCBAs, or monitoring equipment, which is obviously what you're going to talk about next.
Yes. I have to say that when I joined the fire department 28 some odd years ago, is that I was assigned to a hazmat team, and my captain, Ron Gore from Jacksonville,
One of my first instructors.
basically he came to me and he assigned me a monitor and said, every call that you go on, you're going to use this. If I was on a truck company, if I was on an engine company, I was either going to get a set of irons, I was going to get a hook, but what he wound up doing is he gave me the monitor.
Right.
And that was my job, to go ahead and come off that truck, so that way I can monitor the area and find out whether or not we had any type of contamination.
See, a firefighter's watching this and listening to you say that, oh, that's ridiculous, to monitor the air. It's ridiculous until something goes wrong.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous until at age 35 you've been diagnosed. It's ridiculous when you have a heart attack and they find out it had nothing to do with your heart, but it was the inhalation of these gases. So pay attention.
Yes.
This is a big deal.
It's just like the website says right here, is that for hazardous materials response is originally what these monitors were designed for. And everything that we went in, we always, on a hazmat response, we would always dot our I's and cross our T's and make sure that we would do everything before we went inside. But in today's time, is a structure fire not a hazmat event?
We talked of a recent line of duty death, a very tragic one that occurred in the Midwest where a firefighter was killed in a dumpster fire. Now, if you took the materials that were in a dumpster and you put them in a building and you told the responding fire companies, so-and-so's in there, hold, stand back, let's wait for the hazmat team, let's evaluate this, but yet we just run right in and then the dumpster exploded and killed this poor young firefighter. So exactly what you're talking about. Again, look around the room. This is all hazardous materials.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean we shouldn't be going and putting the fire out. It means we should be taking advantage of technology and training to help us manage that problem.
Absolutely. You can't utilize utilize your nose as well as your lungs to go and verify that the environment is safe. So therefore, a floor-gas monitor or some form of atmospheric monitoring is the best resource, the best tool that you can utilize in a specific environment. Floor-gas monitors, again, they provide good technology for us, but also, too, is that it can provide a false sense of security if only the CO and the O2 is within the acceptable levels. I've got to go ahead and look at my two brothers up in Providence, Rhode Island in March of 2006, Lieutenant Anthony Toro. He's going in to fight a fire and with his mask hanging down because of the fact that it was light smoke inside the structure. He was diagnosed, a couple hours later, the first diagnostic case of hydrogen cyanide poisoning.
Well, I can tell you where I was. I was in, no kidding, it was a Saturday or Sunday morning. I was laying in bed with my wife, my phone rings, it's Kurt Verone calling from Providence.
Yes.
He says, we're not sure what's going on here, why? And then we're trying to identify what was in the building or what was this. So I called John Eversole, the late chief of Chicago Hazmat, and I called John, and we went through this, with this. Anyway, a day or two, we were like, duh, this was it. And that was a real turning point for the fire service to realize just how bad this stuff is. Exactly. And not just to the firefighters operating on the inside, but we're going to talk about the ones operating on the outside, too.
Kenneth Baker as our pump operator in Providence. A couple days later in Providence, Again, outside, who ever thought that the firefighters could be exposed to these toxic properties, and it goes on even to today.
In a lot of cases today, we've got firefighters in staging areas where the smoke's blowing right into them. We've got the command level officers in the Alpha Bravo Charlie divisions, safety officers, and we're all walking around breathing this crap, thinking, well, we're not inside, no big deal, right? And we really are dealing with a problem.
Absolutely. In dealing with this is why should we deploy atmospheric monitoring at fires? And again, the tactical use for zoning of the hot zones for the protection, not only for the incident commander, the safety officer, for those that are in the actual area itself, but also, too, for others that may be at the scene of the fire. The thing is that if it should be deployed during all 4 phases of these particular fires that we've talked about. Also, too, is tactics for establishing hot zones for the protection of those outside of the burning building. And it should, like I said, it should be deployed on all of these major aspects in dealing with the fire, no matter how you look at it. I personally, if I was an incident commander at a scene like this, I think as a chief, I would want to have a monitor that I can go in there and monitor the outside environment myself. And therefore, not only are we working inside the structure, we're not pretty much going to be utilizing the monitors inside during the phases of fire.
Right.
But if we have the opportunity to utilize these monitors with an incident commander, so that way he can have something, he can see what's going on, and he can watch amongst all of the other things I know that he has to do. But this would not be another tool that could be utilized as the smoke is coming out during the early morning hours, or late afternoon with the temperatures, the various densities.
And we're funny. We race to get to the fire, and then we can't wait to leave. It's kind of, well, as soon as it's over, let's get out of here, right? And we're so quick to take our gear off and take our mask off. I know I can speak of my department. The masks don't come off until command gets a reading to determine whether or not. In most cases, they're not coming off. We're understanding that actually during the working fire stage, you're more apt to wear your gear and your mask, and where you have a knockdown and you're doing overhaul, you're more apt to want to take it off. But actually, and you'd know better than me, is that smoldering smoke almost worse in some cases?
Absolutely.
Because it's not burning, and it's not burning off some of the carcinogens. Is that fair to say?
Well, you bring up a good point, because when we look at this, when we look at the soot and the smoke that's being generated, is that those ultra-fine particles. Keep in mind is that when you take your PPE off, you are basically sweating. You're hot. You know what's happening to your body. Those pores are open. So therefore, as you're going in, your body is still absorbing. It does not stop as soon as you walk outside the structure. So as you're going back in, your body is sucking it even more. The portals of your pores are open wider. You're getting more of that contamination in, and therefore you're being exposed. Later on in time, you go back to the house and you're looking at at yourself, and you're not feeling right. You're probably having shortness of breath. You're looking at maybe some type of chest tightness that's going on. Your attitude or your ability to function, your emotional changes, your neurological aspects are starting to change a little bit, and it's possibly because of the exposure, unprotected, still going inside there. So in looking at this, I want to explain some reasons, because there's a lot of talk going on, which you probably have heard, as far as utilizing of atmospheric monitors. Well, XYZ fire department utilizes a floor gas meter, but they will keep their masks on until it gets below 35 parts per million. Some departments will go in there and say, well, we're going to lower our standards down to 25 parts per million because of the fact that we want to be a little bit more protective. And then other departments will look at it and they'll say, well, we want to keep them down to maybe 9 parts per million. But the fact remains this, Chief, is that when we look at respiratory protection, we are going into an ideal H environment. Whether there is smoke or if there is particulates, no matter how you look at it in the mind sight of us, because we do this over and over and over again for our career, we're looking at an ideal H environment. In the OSHA requirements, the 29th chapter of the CSR 1910-134, and everybody knows this, is the fact that the paraphrase that we look at is that the employer will evaluate as well as identify the respirator hazards in the workplace. There is no way that you and I can go in there and identify the hazards that are taking place. So therefore, we need to utilize the monitoring. And looking at this is that we will go in there and say that it's an ideal H atmosphere for the protection of our people. However, when we look at an ideal H, what we want to remember, Chief, is the fact that it's one that poses an immediate threat to life, would cause irreversible health effects, or impair an individual's ability to escape from a dangerous atmosphere. Taking that mask off in a decay stage, going through overhaul and stuff like that, you have to remember that in closets and everything else, that absorbs all of that material through the smoke accumulations and everything else, is enough to incapacitate, small as it might be, might go in there and incapacitate. So, and we're looking at, in today's time, there are individuals and departments and stuff like that says, well, why can't we utilize a powered air purifying respirator, a PAPR, or a dust particulate or a particulate canister filter mask. And in light of this is that we have to look at this as the fact that based upon the knowledge of the unknown products that are being produced or that's emanating inside the structure itself during the structure fire, with limited means of ability to evaluate the respiratory hazards. We have none other than these combustible gas indicators.
Again, for those who are watching this, you're thinking, so why can't we just put a little mask on here? Well, it's going in your ears.
Absolutely.
It's getting absorbed in your skin.
It's going in your eyes,
too. And
which is a mucous membrane.
But just keep your gear on. Wear your gear.
Absolutely. The point I want to get across, being that this is an idealized environment, is that if this is the case, then the only remedy that's allowed by OSHA is an atmospheric supplying respirator, meaning it's a respirator that supplies air that the respirator uses, or the responder uses, I should say, with a breathing air from a source independent from the actual environment itself.
SCBA.
SCBA. You can't go wrong. If we're working in there with a chemical cartridge respirator, we're utilizing the contaminants to go and filter out that material inside the structure, into our respiratory tract, and we're breathing it. But there again, those small microns, those microns that are less than 2 microns, very, very microscopic, get through and we breathe it in.
And that's what we're smelling later on.
And that's
when we get home, you smell your clothes. I don't want my gear on. You're still going to, if you can smell it, it's in you. Is probably a good rule of thumb.
So again, the best way of doing this without having any problems whatsoever is to utilize our respiratory protection, self-contained breathing apparatus.
And so there's a link here too. The link that I want to go for is, I spoke with a young firefighter a while ago, and he said to me, once we have the fire knocked down and taking a mask off, I said, keep your mask on. He says, I can't. The peer pressure is incredible. Everybody else is taking their masks off and stuff. And I really appreciate what that kid was saying. I really do, because that's a big deal. So what we need to do is eliminate the peer pressure issue, and that's where leadership kicks in. That's where the lieutenant, the captain, the battalion chief, the deputy, or the chief have to say zero tolerance. And there has to be a zero tolerance attitude. When we're operating in those conditions, the masks do not come off until we give the order. If you've run out of air, you're not taking your mask off and going to work. You're coming out of the building, and then you're going to change your bottle, things like that. But it's got to be sort of based upon policy and procedure. It's got to, you take the policy procedure, then you train upon it, then you verify that training, and then you enforce that training. And we've really got to get the chiefs and the officers out there to enforce the damn thing. I mean, you're going to be responsible. I mean, Rick just read these laws to you. How are you going to defend this when somebody says, well, did you protect them from an admin? Yeah, we give them SCBA. And what's your policy? Well, they take it off when they're ready. Well, you can't do that. So you failed your employee by not keeping a mask on them. Or let's go back to the selfish part, you failed your kids or your wife or your boyfriend, or maybe you got all of the above. I don't care, right? You failed the people who love you by being selfish because it's too hot, it's too cold, I wear my mask.
Absolutely.
I've been around for a while, and I've been involved in firefighter survival for a long time, and the excuses are lame. They're lame excuses. Put your damn stuff on. If it's issued to you, wear it. And officers enforce it. And, we are getting better. We really are seeing a positive improvement in the way we're operating the fire ground. We are starting to see line of duty deaths slow down a little bit.
Yes.
And what I'm saying now, I'm talking about the unnecessary line of duty death. Unfortunately, there are some necessary line of duty deaths. Well, on occasion, our firefighters have to put themselves in harm's way to save a life. It doesn't get any more
part of the job.
Honorable than that.
Yes.
But it's the ones you're talking about here. Young firefighter in great shape, doing a great job, takes the mask off, does it 4 or 5 times one day, he's got chest pains. Next thing you know, he's got a cardiac condition, never goes back to firefighting again.
Absolutely.
Big deal.
Absolutely. It's just, you hit the nail on the head, Chief, as far as recognition, enforcement, and things of that nature. And in time, it takes not only just the incident commander, but it takes everybody. When I look in my job as a safety officer, is that yes, I work as far as the command staff, but also too is that I rely on others to go ahead and work along with me. Any firefighter that's on the site, we have to go in there and provide the safety for everyone, but also too is that we have to take common sense and protect ourselves. and all. And that's all
right.
agencies working.
That's right.
working
And
in
the
here.
problem is, this is sort of an instant gratification world. So if I don't see an impact of it right away, I'm not going to worry about it, kind of thing. And again, I'm involved with the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. We have young firefighters dealing with the cancers I mentioned earlier. This is not some 50, 60, 70-year-olds. I'm talking about 20, 30, 40-year-old firefighters, active firefighters. About 1,000 a year are dying from cancer.
Right.
About 1,000 a year in our business.
That's sad.
Big
That's
deal.
sad. Okay, what we're going to look at is we're going to go right back to where we come from, and we're going to start talking about the 4 phases of fire. But this time, what we're going to be doing is showing the exact same fire, but we're going to utilize the atmospheric monitor. And I think that even though the fire that we were producing at this training facility, small as it might be, the significant amounts of toxins that are being performed, even in this small fire, you can just imagine what the responses that you will take, on a fully furnished house or a larger structure.
Now you're talking about, you mentioned something before, you talked about a 4-gas versus a 5-gas. You feel pretty strongly about that 5th level of protection.
Absolutely.
Can you explain that for real quick, or are we coming to that?
Well, we'll talk about monitors right now, because that way it's going to lead us in. And the thing is that you can see there's various applications of monitors that we have, from single cell to colorimetric chemistry, also to 5-gas combustible indicators. And what we look at is that with a 4-gas monitor, is that as far as the fire is concerned, is that we look at the carbon monoxide that's being generated and the off-gassing processes and the toxins that are actually being generated itself. And being that we're focusing on the 2 chemicals, and you know as well as I do, Chief, is there's a host of chemicals.
Sure.
There's no way that we can come out with a monitor that registers everything.
Right.
But when we look at the 2 chemicals of hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, what that will actually do is it affects the muscles and tissues within the body. It breaks it down through cellular destruction, as we talked about, leaving scar tissue, and also the fact of incapacitation for individuals getting out of the structure itself.
Hydrogen cyanide is basically the off-gassing of the petrochemical stuff we talked about earlier.
Yes.
So we've seen a great increase of that. As more chemicals are developed, we see more of an increase of that risk to firefighters.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Not only we look at the incipient phase, we look at the free burn, but also I would say between the incipient as well as the decay stage, because once that fire has been knocked down,
it's still off-gassing during overhaul.
Exactly.
Sure.
We've got smoldering combustion versus flaming combustion.
Now we mentioned also, go away from the gas issue for a minute, when you see that smoldering fire, it's not out. You got to make sure that it's out. You got to make sure watch out for those pockets of fires we talked about.
So in looking at the 2 specific gases, hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, we can do our perimeter check. We can do what is necessary to look at those particular chemicals, because of the fact that we know that those are the immediate incapacitants, versus the host of other chemicals, as we know that. But these 2 chemicals are the destructors, if you will.
So that's 2 of the 5.
2 of the 5.
What are the others?
We look at our lower explosive ranges. Something that is producing a vapor that is off-gassing, that is going to give us a response relative to what the machine is calibrated for, is going to show us that we're getting into a flammable environment. Oxygen concentration, as we all know, is at about 20.9%. Is that the lower the oxygen concentration, what's taking place is either a chemical reaction, the fire is starting to slow down because incomplete combustion, or if we look at elevated temperatures or elevated concentrations above 23.5%, is we're getting into oxygen enriched. And too much oxygen that would take place inside is going to speed up the combustion. So that is also important. Hydrogen sulfide gases, basically we look at these as a common product of sewer gases. We utilize this as far as confined spaces.
So that's kind of the 5th gas that's critical, but on firefighting perhaps maybe not as critical.
It is still producing hydrogen sulfide.
But by putting a 5-gas monitor on a firefighter, whether it's a trench rescue or if it's a fire operation, giving a little bit better protection.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and you know,
You guys get that? Because I now get it. I understand.
You can't go wrong with your monitors.
And the 5 gases available, obviously from Dräger, but other manufacturers too?
Other manufacturers,
because
they're all over the
not
place.
endorsing anybody today, but we certainly appreciate Dräger helping get the message out. Big deal.
And you know, there are departments, unfortunately, they can't afford to buy specific monitors and things of that nature. So some departments, what they're doing is they're actually pulling out maybe hydrogen sulfide and replacing it with a hydrogen cyanide, so that way at least they can get through. I strongly suggest, you know, for the protection, with a 5 gas, you can't go wrong.
Ballpark, what would a department spend on a 5 gas? Ballpark.
I'm going to say
$1,000,
probably
$500,
probably about
$200.
$2,500 along that line, 25 maybe and less.
Okay.
You know, and that's going to be ballpark. I'm going to say, you know, 2,000, 1,500, somewhere in that area.
So at least, if we could at least put one on the officer of a crew, we'd be far ahead, because we're not doing that at all anywhere,
Absolutely.
really. I mean, few departments, you're not doing it, right?
Oh yeah, we're doing it.
Okay,
Yes.
well, tell us what you're doing in Jacksonville.
In Jacksonville, what we have done is all of our safety officers, which we have 2 vehicles, 2 cars on both sides of in the battalions, they utilize atmospheric monitors. All our truck companies have got them, because every structure fire that we go to, one.
So the officer's wearing it.
And the officer will wear it, or the designated person on that truck company. They will utilize that monitor, and they will monitor the environment until they are completely
So you're picking
finished.
something that will be at every structural fire.
Absolutely.
Or a rescue, and that would be, or heavy rescue.
And heavy, heavy engine companies,
Interesting,
stuff like that.
So there's a solution.
You know,
You identify what vehicle will be at all your runs, and if your budget's tight, and whose isn't today, if you've only got the money to purchase one of these, then you put it on that vehicle or on that person, and then you provide the protection.
And then provide the protection. But please, please, remember one thing, is that even though you have it, don't leave it in the apparatus, just like I just said. Pull it out on every call that you go to.
Well, yeah, I mean,
be proficient with it.
Wear it.
Wear it. You know, it's just like wearing your SCBA.
Sure.
And in looking at this, as far as the incipient phase, just like we're showing this video, is that you will actually be able to look at the process that's going to be taking place with the video itself. As soon as there it goes, it's moving. It's basically a little stationary. You can see the movement of my hand there, and you can see the numbers that are fluctuating in the reading that is actually taking place. As we start looking at this, the oxygen concentration was at 20.9%. When we look at hydrogen sulfide, 1.7. Now, that number basically means a lot, because through this is that the 1% equals 10,000 parts per million. Okay, so we look at the percentage of it, but we also look at the toxicity of the chemical itself. The actual carbon monoxide levels that can take place, you can see the elevated processes that are showing with carbon monoxide also. So therefore, these particular characteristics, these numbers, small as it might be, are significant in that particular fashion. And what does it happen to the firefighter that is exposed to this over that 20, 30, 35-year career?
Or 5-year career.
Or 5-year. You never know.
That's exactly. I mean, you can be in a fire department that's not going to a lot of fires over a period of time and have less exposure. You can be in a fire department that's going to a lot of fires, and within your first or second year, you've got the equivalent exposure to somebody who in another community takes 20 years to reach.
Right.
So whether it's 1 fire or 50 fires, you got to protect yourself from this stuff. And I mean, the fire doesn't say, all right, on the 80th one, I'm going to get you sick. It depends what's burning in that building. You don't know. So even if you're in a department that's slow with fires, you have that 1 fire at that 1 facility. North of here, they had a fire over the weekend near Erie, and some firefighters received chemical burns. Well, if that was the only fire you went to this year, that's the one you got your chemical burns on.
What about the firefighters from somewhere in Jersey that went and did?
Those were investigators, actually.
And
the fire investigators went in afterwards, and some of them passed out. They had to be treated. It became like a little miniature MCI.
Absolutely.
And these are investigators. So the investigators, the arson investigators, also understanding the importance of being protected too.
Yes.
And monitoring.
Right. The next phase that we look at is that we're looking at the growth phase. And as you'll notice, Chief, is that the oxygen level at this point in time is still up at relative normal levels, but the hydrogen cyanide level is now starting to increase, because we're now at 2.3 parts per million, which is over 20,000 parts per million as far as the toxicity is concerned.
So if your monitor doesn't include that ability, you're missing that.
Right.
So yeah.
Exactly, because even though it's low enough, it may not go in and register. It's still there.
Sure.
You can also see that the sulfide, hydrogen sulfides, there's nothing there, but your carbon monoxide level is basically going in and starting to elevate also. And looking at this is that we have to keep in mind is that, again, as the fire is starting to intensify, it is starting to utilize and train more oxygen to give it the fuel that it needs, but inside that particular environment itself is starting to go from a complete phase of burn to an incomplete phase.
Right.
And therefore the alarms that are going off with the monitors, letting the individuals inside know that either A, they're getting into a very, very toxic range, IDLH range, or they have already saturated the monitor or gotten a high level of that particular exposure of contamination.
It's telling you to pay attention.
Pay attention. Absolutely. Now again, normally speaking, is that you and I would not take the monitors inside the structure, but here we are trying to go in there and prove a point because of the low amount of fire that we're dealing with to show what the toxic properties are. And I'll tell you, as far as the students that I train, that when we get to this level, especially as the fire burns, what's really interesting inside there, that as the heat is absorbing inside that room, both on the walls, the ceiling, and the floor, you'll actually see that it re-radiate itself back to the fire again, but the smoke starts to create its buoyancy. You can see the actual waves of it going and moving around, and with the use of the atmospheric monitor telling you that there's something there, it works every time. It'll never fail you. The fully developed phase, again, this is also important. You can see that the levels are now starting to increase on a little bit of everything. We're seeing, again, because of the fact that when we actually took this video, it was near a window. Okay, I had a videographer from outside panning in. But also, too, is that as you see the waves that are going through across the monitor itself, not only is that smoke, but that's convected currents of heat that's traveling across there. And in looking at this, you can see that the oxygen now is starting to drop down a little bit. You can see the hydrogen sulfide, or cyanide is going up some more. The hydrogen sulfides are now being shown, and look at our carbon monoxide level is actually going up there. In this particular fire, we were utilizing not only the wood cribbing material, but we were also utilizing, just to let you know, is that we were utilizing a synthetic rug, we were utilizing a couch or a little recliner chair, and we're also utilizing some polyurethane foam. And all of this material was going in.
It's in every house fire we're going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, too, is that the decay phase, we wanted to go ahead and do something different in this particular field.
Boy, look at the CO there.
And also, too, is that we were utilizing colorimetric tubes that, with the colorimetric sensors, such as this, we were able to go in there and capture real-time contamination of the environment itself through bellows pumps, through pumping instrumentation, and you can see that the CO level was already up to 70 parts per million. So again, what's taking place, you know, not only to this particular area, what's happening to you and I inside the structure.
Well, and if we responded on a CO run, we would tell the people to get out of the house.
Absolutely.
So then why wouldn't we keep our equipment on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of the interesting things that I want to get across here, and we were talking about permeation, and I wanted to hold off on this until we got to this slide, but you know, it was discussed and all. But also, too, is the fact that we conducted a test, and we were looking at the qualities of smoke and everything, is that we actually took the monitor, and we placed the monitor inside the coat, hooked up to a suspender, and with this, we did a fire, simulated fire, outside with a open confinement. And what we wound up doing is we put material inside here. We utilized some polyurethane material to show as far as the toxicity. Now, I want you to look at the fire as it's burning. The low fire right now, when this material starts to burn, go through the decomposition phase, the intensity of the flames, the quality of the smoke is going to start getting darker. You can see the flames getting a little bit more intense right now. You can also see that when we start utilizing the monitor here, we're getting some readings just standing outside.
That's where we talk about our pump operators and our command
Absolutely.
officers, yeah.
We wanted to accelerate by adding some smoke to go ahead and generate the toxicity of this material. So with this in mind, is that with the gear that we've had, we showed that the 5-gas meter is obviously activating and showing what kind of responses that they're getting. But also, too, is that with the single cell meter for hydrogen cyanide, you can see that what kind of responses that you're going to get. And this is going to be really interesting because looking at this, standing in that smoke for a while, we're getting a little, getting a little over 3 parts per million of cyanide just along with that. Now again, utilizing pallets and hay and some
we're outside.
And we're outside. Yeah. Just think what that building is supercharged with smoke. Well, what is it going to do?
And that's it. We know it. Well, again, the test for the firefighters when you get home, back to quarters, take your gear off, smell your clothes.
Absolutely.
That's the after effect.
Yes. Off-gassing of the gear. Where is the gear going in today's time? We get finished with a fire, we put it back in the engine.
Mrs. Jones who's having trouble breathing.
Yeah, we put it in a car for volunteer firemen.
Right.
We take it out or whatever the case may be. One of the things that we wound up doing as far as testing is concerned is that we placed the gear after we got finished with it, and we put it inside a plastic bag with some of the monitors that we were just talking about.
Cool.
Now, letting it sit there for just a few minutes with our videographer watching this, we were actually able to capture the readings of the cyanide that was actually being produced in this particular outside test. The monitor itself, through the bag, they're showing about 1.4 parts per million. After about 5 minutes of that gear sitting right there, we've opened it up so that way you get a better reading of it. You can see 1.3 parts per million. That's a little over 10,000 parts per million.
Nothing's burning.
Nothing's burning, and that's the off-gassing. And what's taking place in your vehicle? What's taking place in your station?
You put your gear on to go on an EMS run. Here's Mrs. Jones having trouble breathing. You're exposing her.
Yes.
I mean,
true. Yeah. Very, very true. So again, off-gassing is going to be important. Now, how can we go in here and take care of this? Okay, decontamination.
Clean your gear.
Clean your gear with the use of washer extractors. Okay, washer extractors are very, very good. In our department in Jacksonville, we've got probably about half a dozen of these that are strategically placed around the city, and we have a very, very stringent decon process. Every 6 months they wash their gear, and if it needs to be done before then, they do it, and they wash it. We follow the specifications to the NFPA standards 2008. If you don't do that, one of the other ways of doing it is the use of negative pressure decontamination with an electric fan. Do not utilize a gas-operated fan because what are we doing? We're putting more CO back into the gear itself. We're pumping it in there. Turn your gear inside out, put the fan on it, and blow it back out. Because
that's a good idea.
if we sit there and turn it around the other way and put air on that, we're actually making that contamination go deeper. So decontamination is
just laying the gear out, running some fans in front of it.
Some fans on. You can set it up at a fire scene. Do what you need to do, and it's very quick, very simple, and
just to get that stuff out.
Get the stuff. Absolutely, absolutely. Now again, as far as the instrumentation, as far as toxicity, when we do our monitoring, why is it important? Chief, in looking at this, is that I believe in documentation. I believe in the fact that if it wasn't documented, it never happened. Okay, and in today's time, when we look at the health effects of firefighters, the risk managements and job injuries, things of that nature, we need to have documentation. And a lot of the sophistication that's coming in with atmospheric monitoring has the capabilities where they can actually data log the information. In other words, you capture it, you bring it back to the station, you download it, you apply this to your reports, so that way if something happens to you or I, we can go in there and we can monitor that. We can actually go ahead and use that. We can also, in the event that there is any forms of litigation that would take place as far as fires, investigations and stuff, arson investigations, criminal attorneys and stuff like that, would want to have that type of information so we can capture the overall response. In the series that we did as far as the burn, you can see that the LEL overall got up about 8%. We can see that the oxygen, the lowest it got was 19%, and then HCN was 3.8 parts per million. Hydrogen sulfide was 11. Carbon monoxide, 645%. So again, it behooves us to utilize the monitors, to be proficient with it, and allow that to do the work for us. Okay?
Makes sense. You know, let me just touch on something. Cancer, I mentioned earlier. We've got to pick one or the other. We can't not want to wear our gear and not want to wear our masks, but then want presumptive protection.
Right.
We can't operate in environments during overhaul without our SCBAs and then claim our departments weren't protecting us when there's perfectly good SCBAs there. So, I mean, I'm pretty well known as an advocate for firefighter survival, but we've got to do our part. You know, I pushed very hard on the cancer issue. I got very involved with the IFF and the IFC on a cancer issue a few years ago, where we battled on behalf of firefighters when an association was claiming there's no connection between firefighting and cancers. I mean, but, you know, we've got to use this stuff. And it's not real fair for us to be the hypocrites. In one hand, we're racing into these buildings and then playing around during overhaul, not wearing our equipment and not monitoring the conditions. But yet a month later, when we get sick, hey, we want our departments to protect us.
Sure.
There's got to be some ownness of our own in this as well.
Right. We have to be our own responsibility.
And our officers have got to enforce it.
Absolutely.
Save us from ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely. You know, whatever mistakes that you make, and when I do my presentations, one of the things that I always say is this, is that whatever actions that you take on the fire ground itself, think about what those actions are and think about what's at home waiting on you.
Sure, exactly. Yep.
You know, because those individuals, they depend on you,
That's it.
not only just for the moment, but for their lifetime.
Who's in your wallet?
You know, and again, you can't, you don't
want to hurt them.
You don't want to hurt them.
Right.
Absolutely. So, with this in mind, I'd like to basically go in there and, as we end this program, there's a couple things that I like to go in there and say, is the fact that we owe a deep debt of special thanks. I personally, and I'm sure the chief will say the same way, is the fact that we thank our firefighters, our brothers and sisters that are out there every day that's beating the bush to do the jobs that they do.
And there's never been a time where we seem to feel less appreciated.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, with all the politics and the games that are being played with budgets. But
right. But all in all, is that we still need to band together.
Absolutely.
And we need to protect each other.
Absolutely.
And we need to go ahead and continue doing the job that we need to do. Also, too, is the fact that you have special equipment. You have equipment that you carry on your apparatus, self-contained breathing apparatus. You have your PPE. You got atmospheric monitoring. Whatever it is, use it to the best of your ability. Okay? You have, like we had just talked a little while ago, is that you've got families at home waiting for you. You know, do your jobs right, go home at the end of the day, and that way you can enjoy it.
Well, you know, if your department came in tomorrow and said, since you're not wearing the SCBAs, we're going to pull them. We'd go nuts. We'd have riots in the streets.
Absolutely.
So then we need to back up how we feel and use this stuff.
Right. Also, too, is the fact that I'd like to thank you, Chief.
It's a pleasure.
My brother. I always, you know, I look at Chief Goldfeder as a brother, because there's been many, many times that I've called him in frustration because of firefighters that have been incapacitated as to cardiac natures and things of that nature, and always call them and say, you know, what can we do? We need to do something to basically go in there and try to educate our firefighters. And Chief Goldfeder and I are strong advocates into the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. And in dealing with this, is the fact that you know, every year we go to a memorial. It's a family memorial. It's a family funeral, where we go and we memorialize our brother and sister firefighters that have lost their lives in various aspects of firefighting, I should say. And also, too, is that what really affects us, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I'm sure Chief Goldfeder will feel the same way, is the fact that while we're there, we're actually looking at the families that are going up to pay respect. And you look at those individuals, and you pretty much want to go in there and you know, do whatever you possibly can to go in there and help them out. But again, you know, I really appreciate you know, Chief Goldfeder's help with me on this mission. You know, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue going. I also want to go in there and thank the St. Johns County Fire Rescue Department's Hazardous Materials team, because of the fact that they were very, very helpful in performing the test that we needed to do, and the administrations of the First Coast Technical College in St. Augustine, as well as the various instructors that assisted with us. And again, I also want to pay a special thank you to my family here from Dräger for their technical assistance team that come down and worked along with us. So with this in mind, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all of the help that you've done. I want you to go ahead and take this into consideration for the fact that we are here to help you, and we are going to do the best we can to provide this information to you free of charge. That way you look at this thing, you can look at it over and over and over again. Use this in your training mechanism. Use this to go and educate further firefighters that are coming in, to help them be aware of the facts. And let's work together to stop this this progression of fire duty deaths. And again, Chief, I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You are a blessing. You really are, and I love you to death.
My mother about that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
I would like to thank Captain Rick Rockford and especially Deputy Chief Billy Goldfeder for the tremendously important information that they shared in this evening's webinar. I hope that all the attendees found the second webinar in our informational series useful and are able to bring the message of the importance of detection to their daily lives in the fire service. Now, I would like to begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. Captain Rockford is available to answer some of the questions that you have posted during this presentation. Captain Rockford, one of the questions we got tonight was, being in the middle of brush fire season here in Florida, should we be concerned with cyanide and other gases during active brush fires?
That's a good question, because me, coming from Florida myself, understand what we are going through down in the Florida area with all the fires that are taking place. But we need to go back to fire behavior. We're talking fire behavior here, folks. Fire behavior as far as fires burning, cellulose fiber material, aka wood, that's burning inside these wooded areas, producing toxic materials. The toxicity of plants, fungus, everything else that's burning inside there is creating, even in the forest setting, an ideal H environment. So this is no different than a structure fire. We should be wearing all of our respiratory protection, and sorry to say, with a self-contained breathing apparatus, I realize the fact that these are cumbersome working in these particular areas itself, but we still need to protect ourselves outside just as well as we do inside.
Very good. Well, we have another question over here. When are toxic gases most dangerous during a fire?
In all four phases of fires that we've looked at, we've talked about tonight, between these particular phases, the incipient phase, the growth phase, the free burn phase, as well as the decay stage, is all producing toxic materials. But looking at these facets between the incipient phase, the free burn, and the growth, these are actually eliminate the free burn, but because that in particular area is burning with full intensity itself, burning off a lot of the properties themselves. But with the flaming forms of combustion, as well as incorporating with the decay stage of the fire itself, is putting out large volumes of toxic materials, not only hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, but a host of other chemicals itself. So with these particular areas, I'm going to go in and say between the incipient to the growth stage and the actual decay stage of the fire itself is producing these high numbers of toxic materials.
Okay, good to know. Well, thank you for all your questions. Unfortunately, our time has run out. If you are unable to get your question answered, or if you think of your question later down the road, you may feel free to post them or please email us at info.usa@dräger.com. Now on to the two special drawings. Because Dräger truly believes in the importance of gas detection, we will now be selecting a participant from tonight's webinar to win a Dräger Exam 5000 gas detector.
The winner for tonight is Lieutenant Scott Mensing from Wheaton Fire Department in Wheaton, Illinois.
Congratulations, Scott.
Congratulations, Scott.
And on to the second one. Firefighters, or fire services personnel, are very close to Dräger's heart. That's why we produce products to help keep them safe while on the job, and why we are so passionate about informing them on the importance of topics that affect them on their daily lives, and therefore ultimately the lives of their loved ones. So we are honored to present to a participant from tonight's webinar a donation of $1,000 to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation in their name. And the winner is...
The winner for tonight is Dennis Bruner from the Branson, Missouri Fire Department in Branson, Missouri.
Congratulations, Dennis.
Congratulations. And I can honestly say that as behalf of the National Fallen Firefighter Association, myself being a member of this organization, this money will be going to a worthy cause for the families as well as the workers there to provide the necessary education to the firefighters that have lost their lives.
Very good. Well, this concludes this evening's presentation. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. This webinar will be available on demand shortly. We will send you a follow-up email once this has been posted online. If you're in need of any detection equipment, we ask that you think about Dräger. For more information about the products we offer, please visit us at our website at www.dräger.com.
Before we close, I'd like to add 4 more things as a refresher into tonight's lecture. What I want to start off with is I want to start off by saying for all of you out there to be safe. Everything that you do, I want you to go ahead and think smart, number 2. Take your tactics and strategies at hand. Number 3, I want you to wear all of your PPE. Remember to wear all your PPE, including utilizing of your self-contained breathing apparatus. And number 4 is that remember that there are family members that are waiting at home for you. Be safe.
Once again, thank you for joining us tonight, and have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.